Our presentation is about the iconography of Medea. Our research question is, how is Medea depicted throughout three different mediums? The mediums we are going to discuss are texts, paintings, and performing arts. The story of Medea is connected to the hero Jason. When Jason was born, his parents were afraid Peleus would kill him, so they sent him away. When he grows up, he returns, but Peleus says he has to go find the golden fleece. The fleece is at Colchis in the Black Sea, so Jason and the Argonauts go there. King Aeetes of Colchis tells Jason he can have the fleece if he tames 2 fire-breathing bulls and fights warriors grown from dragon teeth. This is where Medea enters the story. Medea helped him on the condition he would marry her and take her away. Medea made the dragon sleep so Jason could kill it and take the fleece. They escape Aeetes together after Medea kills and cuts up her own brother. She throws him overboard bit by bit, so her pursuing father has to stop and collect him. When they return, Peleus still does not want to give up his throne. Medea now shows Peleus' daughters a trick which they think can rejuvenate their father, but in the end they end up killing him. Jason and Medea move to Corinth, they marry and have 2 children. After 10 years, Jason gets an opportunity to marry Creusa, the daughter of a local king. Medea first seems to agree, but she poisons the wedding dress of Creusa and punishes Jason by killing their common children. She then flees to Athens on a chariot with dragons, where she marries King Aegeus. With Aegeus she has another son named Medus. The depictions of Medea in ancient Greek literature have been different over time. The oldest surviving textual sources of Medea are from archaic Greece. Hesiod, who lived in the 7th century BC, writes positively about Medea, although contemporary art shows the bad stories were already known during this period. He describes her as a goddess and a good wife. Around the same time, Eumelus wrote an epic concerning Medea, and he also writes about her in a good manner. In his version, her children are killed by Hera after Zeus tries to court Medea. So, at first Medea was described positively, although the bad stories would have been known to the writers, they chose not to tell these. She does have magical abilities, but she uses her power for good things. After the archaic period, and with the emergence of tragedy, the tone of Medea's stories changes. She is no longer described as good, but as cruel or evil. The most important textual source showing this shift is Euripides' tragedy called Medea. Written around 431 BC, this version focuses on her downfall instead of her good deeds. He portrays her as a cruel foreign murderer who knows and uses black magic. Medea killing her children is likely added to the story during this period, as tragedy is known to add extra drama to existing stories. A second source depicting Medea in a bad way is the Argonautica by Apollonius of Rhodos. Like Euripides, he depicts her as a cruel foreign murderer and writes about her betraying her family. So, to conclude, there were always bad stories known about Medea, but the shift of focusing on these in literature happened around the time tragedies were starting to appear. Tragedies focused on her downfall, where earlier epics focused more on her positive traits.
Now we'll talk about Medea in the medium painting. You might think that looking at Medea in painting automatically means looking at the iconography of Medea in later times. Though it is true that the story of Medea was particularly popular in the 19th century, and I will therefore mostly talk about that time, the tradition of depicting Medea in painting goes back way further, even to Roman times. As we can see in these frescoes, were found in Pompeii and Herculaneum. The scene depicted is the moment before Medea kills her children. She seems tormented and in doubt, but is already holding the dagger. This very scene is also chosen by the painter Eugène Delacroix, who was probably also familiar with the frescoes. The painting, made in 1838, shows the moment of tension before Medea kills her sons. She seems in despair, flung between the rage against Jason and the love for her children, but as we all know, it is the rage that will win at the end. Medea is not depicted as a sorceress, but the work is all about the drama of the violent act that will happen and the emotion of Medea. An example of how Medea is depicted very differently can be seen in the work of Frederick Sandys and John William Waterhouse. They focus themselves more on the figure of Medea as a sorceress or as a dangerous woman that can be in some regard linked to the pre-Raphaelite femme fatale, of which we can see some examples on the slide. Sandy's Medea is easily recognizable as a magician. She's making a potion and she has some of these stereotypical potion ingredients in front of her. Her jewelry, as well as her appearance and some details in the background, like the Egyptian figure of Sekhmet and the golden fleece, reveal her Oriental origins. The red necklace is also interesting. It is worn by several older women in paintings of Sandy's and in those of one of his contemporaries and friend Rossetti. All these women portray an example of the femme fatale, as being the archetypical dangerous woman who will lead the man she seduces to destruction, making use of deception and sometimes magic. Some pre-Raphaelites were particularly interesting in depicting this type of woman since they thought she was more alluring and interesting than the ideal of Victorian womanhood. However, during the 1860s and 1870s, the traditional iconography of Medea as being the dangerous femme fatale was also challenged. Under the influence of the first feminist movements, the general idea of women either being the Victorian angel or the evil witch was taken down by some. This meant for the story of Medea that people started to focus rather on the ambiguity of her magic and on the earlier stages of her story, wherein she uses her magic to help Jason get the golden fleece. This resulted in an iconography, mostly supported by the progressive feminist thinkers and artists, wherein Medea is not completely evil and rather a victim of Jason's cruelness, instead of the corrupt and seductive witch. The artist Gustave Moreau gives an excellent example of this iconography of Medea. He paints her as an Eve-like figure who, together with Jason, just triumphed over the monster that protected the golden fleece. Another artist who fits in this progressive movement is Edward Burne-Jones, who worked together with William Morris on a series of illustrations and text wherein Medea is seen more as a victim of Jason's unreliability.
The third medium we're going to reflect on is how Medea is depicted in the performing arts. Medea was a fascinating and intriguing character for opera and theater, but also ballet. Her extreme actions and fate made her have a prominent role. 3 masterworks that were made in 3 different periods, called the Medeas, one by Charpentier in 1693, one by Cherubini in 1797, and one by Mayer in 1813. Medea's magical powers have always been a prominent role in her story, and therefore also in theater and opera. In Pascal Dussapin's opera of 1992 that was based on the play Medea Material by Heiner Müller in 1982, Medea's magical powers symbolize the destructive force of her passions. But there are several ways of interpreting her magic. 2 ways were distinguished over time. The psychological interpretation, which places the destructive force in Medea's own mind, and the political sociological approach, in which the magic serves as an element of characterization of the barbarian or stranger in conflict with civilization. A 21st century opera by Aribert Reimann called Medea can be ascribed to the second interpretation. Reimann clearly reflects on Medea's power that fears and destructs, but also needs the unknown, or the foreigner. Medea was an immigrant, an exile who struggled to adapt and integrate into the new culture around her. But she was willing to change her ways and adapt to the new culture. However, after the lack of understanding and hatred against her, Medea ends up the murderous witch that we all know. In Reimann's opera, the golden fleece and Medea's magical powers are the central symbols of his reflection on the functioning and the effects of power in our own modern contemporary society. In earlier works, the fleece and the magical powers were rather symbolic expressions of an uncontrollable force within Medea herself.